Today, we're going to walk through the process of how to make this, an animated logo inside of DaVinci Resolve. And if you've done video production for any amount of time, you're probably familiar with After Effects. And unfortunately, a lot of people are uncomfortable going anywhere else for their video production. And I think that's ridiculous because I am an avid DaVinci Resolve user. And I think people ought to learn Fusion, and that's what I'm here for. I'm gonna take you step by step on how to create this. We're gonna start with what kind of file you wanna be using, how to import it, how to animate it, and finally, how to export it in all the different formats you could possibly need. With all this in mind, there's chapters available for this video, so if you need to jump around, you have the freedom to do so. Also, I wanna put it out there, this video is going to be a little bit longer because this is for the people who want to learn, who are willing to dedicate the time to learn something new and to get past this barrier they've been dealing with. If you're willing to put the time in, I'm willing to hold your hand through this entire process and make sure that by the time this video is finished, you know this process inside and out and you understand it simply. So if you're here for the ride, then so am I. And if you haven't seen it yet, I'd really recommend watching this video I made already. It's linked on screen. It's all about how to use Fusion inside of DaVinci Resolve, because without a basic knowledge of Fusion, you might find yourself struggling in following along with this video. This video serves as kind of like a part 2 to this video, so you don't need to go watch it, but it would probably benefit you if you haven't seen it already. So go give it a watch and then pop back over here. So without further ado, let's get started. So this logo we're going to be working with today, it's for a trading firm in San Francisco. They're called Skyline Markets. This logo is perfect for the task because you can see it's full of simple cut and dry shapes and communicates finances in trading, with the buildings kind of being like the candles in the trading chart, while still providing an image of the San Francisco skyline. This one's going to be super easy to work with. And like I said, if you find anything confusing, I'm here walking you through this entire process. And if you want to follow along, you can go to the first link in the description, grab this logo for free from my website. It's just a free download in the follow along section, so that as you're watching this video, you can be following the same steps that I'm making and following along in perfect time. Again, it's just the first link in the description. Go check it out if you can. So here we go. We're inside of DaVinci Resolve, and I have a 4K timeline open and a Fusion composition on my timeline. Now I have this Fusion composition set to 10 seconds, just because generally speaking, 10 seconds is a good amount of time for the logo to pop in on screen, viewers to register what they're looking at, and then appreciate the logo for what it is once it's already on screen. So next, once that's made, we're gonna pop over to the Fusion page. This is where you're gonna be spending 90% of your time. Now again, don't be intimidated by Fusion. I promise it's easier than you think. Like I said, I'm gonna walk you through this here. But to import our logo, it's a little bit different, right? So normally when you're putting something into Fusion or even in DaVinci Resolve, you'll import it into your media pool. Well, the type of files that we're going to be working with don't necessarily work that way. But before we do anything with importing any files, we're going to add our blank background node here, because if you watch the first video, you know we always start with that. But next, what I'm going to do is show you how to import what's called an SVG file, or scalable vector graphic. Now, it's different from PNGs just because a scalable vector graphic is vector, meaning it can be scaled to any size and not lose any quality. And this is perfect for working with logos in Fusion just because of the way the mechanics of the software read SVG files. Let me show you what I mean. So to import an SVG file, what you're going to do is you're going to come up to your Fusion tab here, click it, come down to import, and then press SVG, right? Click that, and it's going to ask you to find your SVG file. Now, I have mine here, and again, you can download this from my website and follow along, but I'm going to click this, press open, and you're going to get this menu that pops up. It's going to be asking for your image size and height. It's set to automatically 3000 by 3000, and that's fine. You can keep it there. Because we already put our background node onto our workspace, and our timeline is automatically 3840 by 2160, when we press OK here, it's just going to import the 3000 by 3000 logo on our 4K composition, right? That's all you have to worry about. So once you've imported it, you could see it kind of loads in this grouped node here. Now I'm going to make our viewing window small here because I know this is going to open up in a big group. So I'm going to double click it, and there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? So as you go through here, you can kind of see that these shapes that are in this group make our logo, right? They make our logo. There's a lot of stuff going on here though. Let's break it down. Because SVG files are a bunch of specific shapes, like I said, the shapes that can be scaled up and down and not lose any quality, the way DaVinci Resolve Fusion reads these files is it makes those shapes out of masks from background nodes, right? So if you have, for example, let's just hypothetically say the Apple logo, the Apple in that shape, if I were to import that in an SVG, what I'm going to get is a white background node with a mask cut out in that perfect shape. So in this case, when we imported our Skyline Markets logo, we get that same sort of thing here. You can kind of see the different things going on. Here's all our letters down here. But every piece is like a puzzle. All these puzzle pieces fit together to make our logo, right? So now it's just a matter of going through each one of these little node stacks right here, because each each node stack is a different shape, figuring out what's what and animating it the way we want it to. In simple terms, to make this animated, we're going to animate the shape of the mask that connects to that background node. We're going to give it some motion. To start with, let's at least get our big giant node group connected to our flow line, right? So if we set this back to media out, there we go. We could see the whole logo right here, right? This is what we're working with in this color specifically. So here's the workflow that I found works the best. When animating logos, you want to hide everything except for the very first element that you want to work on animating first. How do I know which element I want to work on animating first? Well, in this case, this is easy. I want to work on these front buildings right here because naturally, people's eyes read and take in information from left to right. So we want to start on the far left side of our logo. So I'm going to hide everything except for this first building. Now, being in mind, this is just a little quirk of working with the software here that I found out after doing this enough times. When you open up this node group, the very last one before it goes into the merge node is a blank background node that everything else feeds into, which then feeds into your merge node, okay? So you want to hide everything except for this node stack right here. You can leave that alone, okay? So for the sake of being able to see things, I'm going to push this back here, move my viewing window over here. So I want to hide all of these other things right here. So I'm going to go through and just turn off all of these merge nodes because it's a lot less nodes than hiding everything else that comes with them. And I know this feels a little tedious, but this is just a more organized way of going about things, especially if you're learning for the first time. You want to be able to see exactly what you're working on without being confused on anything else. And it is, after all, just a few clicks for the sake of learning, for the sake of being organized. It's a little bit of a time sacrifice that I'm willing to make. Cool. Okay, so you can see here we have everything hidden except for our very first building. Now I'm going to extend this window out because I want a little bit more working space here. But what I can tell you, what we are going to do is, because these specific nodes here account for both of these two buildings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break them up so that we make two node stacks. I'm just going to clone this one. One stack is for the first building on the left and one stack is for the first building on the right. So to do that, we're going to work with more merge nodes and more background nodes. So if I were to take a merge node right here, connect it to my flow line. Now I don't want this to be the background input. Again, if you'd watched my first video, you'll know that when going into the background of a merge node, which is always the yellow input, by the way, if you're starting something at the beginning, you always want to put a blank background node. Hence why we put the blank background node at the beginning earlier. Now we can connect this to the foreground input and boom, we have our assets again. But I said I wanted to clone it, right? So I'm going to take another merge node, put it right here, take these, copy, paste, bada bing, bada boom. There we go. Bob's your uncle. I can even hide the first one and you can still see that it's there as proof that it worked. Okay, so now we have these two things going on. Because I want this first node stack to only account for this first building right here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the second one. Okay, following along here with me, I'm going to hide this second stack by turning off the merge node. What I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in here so I know exactly what I'm working with, and then we're going to select the mask node. Now in this mask node, you can see that I have all these points that make the shape. So it's okay, I can mess this up, and in fact, I'm going to select these points and just press backspace, gone. And because I don't want these ones either, I'm going to select them, backspace, backspace, and select these, backspace, and we're done. It's that simple. And now I just have what I want to be that first building in this first mask. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide this one, okay, turn this one on, and do the opposite for this one, okay? So I am wanting to get rid of this building now. So I'm going to select these points, press backspace, select these points, press backspace, and now I have just this building. So when I turn them both on, you can see I have them both. Now there is a little bit of like a little gap here, so I am going to recommend that you play around with this just a little bit. What I'm doing here is I'm selecting this point, I'm holding shift on my keyboard and pushing it forward just a little bit so that the line stays perfectly straight. I'm going to do the same thing right here. Again, I just want to kind of close that gap just a little bit right there so that when I back out, it looks perfect. Like I said, we want to animate this from left to right. So now that we have both of these buildings broken down into two separate node stacks, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hide the second one and thus hide the second building because I want to focus on just animating this first building first. Here's where it gets fun. These next few steps are the basis for this entire process. So pay attention to this part, okay? I'm going to break it down really simply for you. To do the animating, you're going to be in this mask node. In this case, it's called path when you import SVGs into Fusion. So what I'm going to do, okay, is I'm going to take my playhead down here in my timeline, and I'm going to go to the point in which I want my animation to be finished, or at least this part of the animation to be finished. So I want this first building to be done animating in, we'll say right here at 7 seconds. And you can see I'm at 7 seconds based on the position of my playhead and this little number 7 represented right here, right? That tells you what frame you're on. Because I want the shape of this mask to be exactly what it is right now, meaning done animating at the 7th frame, I'm going to come over here to my inspector. You can see right click here for shape animation, okay? When you click that keyframe and turn that on, that saves the shape of your mask in exactly the position that it is right now. So after you have this keyframe selected right here, what we're going to do is we're going to work backwards, but because we want this shape to pop up from bottom moving up, as we go backwards, we're going to pull this the shape down, right, with these points. So we're at frame 7 here. I'm gonna go to frame 5, and I just want just this point right here to be pulled back just so that it's in line with this one right here, okay? Now I'm gonna do the same thing with this one so that from between frame 5 and 7, we get this popping out right here, okay? Cool. Nice, easy, simple, clean shapes. From frame 5, I'm going to go to frame 3. I'm going to move that point that we just pulled over on the bottom up just a little bit so that I have space to grab this one right here, right beneath it. Grab this one here, pull this one down, and then I can pull this one right here down with it. And these ones down as well. Because again, we want the shape to pop up from bottom to up. So again, you select the point, grab shift, and then pull it down. Let's check out what we have so far. So shape pops up and then pops out to the left. And it's all just a matter of moving these shapes and understanding that the color you have within these points is the fill color you have here. So whatever shape these points make is going to make the shape that you're animating. So from frame, what was I on? 3, I'm going to go to 1, and from frame 1, I just want this to be all the way down. So I'm going to select all these points right here, press shift, drag them down here, select this point, press shift, drag this down here. So now we have this at frame 0, this at frame 1, it pops up and it moves out just like that. That looks really good. And if on frame 0, you want to kind of like hide all of this stuff so that it comes out of nothing, you can. I'm just going to move them all into a tiny little clump so that it looks like they're all kind of like popping out of nothing. You know what I mean? This is all preferential. You can do however you please with this. I just want this to look like it's coming out of nothing on frame 0. So now when I zoom out, you can hardly even see that. And now we get, looks good. If you want to make it look better, here's what you're going to do. You're going to come into the mask node for the shape that we're working on. In this case, it's path 1, because when you import SVG files, the mask shapes are referred to as path. In your inspector, come up to settings, check motion blur. And in motion blur, you want to turn the quality all the way up to 10. Now watch what it looks like when we play it back. It just has kind of like a smoother kind of feel to it, you know? Looks good. Now, just for a touch of quality, I'm going to come into the spline editor right here where you could see the curve of the motion and the speed associated with said motion on a chart right here. What you do is you select all your points by dragging and selecting, and I pressed S on my keyboard to smooth the transition between all these points out, just so that it makes the motion of the shape popping up look just a little bit smoother. All right, so again, here it is. Looks pretty decent. I like it. Let's move on to the next shape, okay? This is, we're starting to rinse and repeat here. I'm going to hide my spline editor. So now we're moving on to the next shape. I'm going to turn on this merge node right here that activates our second building, right? So we know that the last animation ended on frame 7. So we want this one to pick up from frame 7. But again, since we're working backwards in animating our shapes, first we need to figure out what frame we want this one to be done animating on. So the last one went to 7. We'll set this one to, say, 13, right? So with this one turned on, I'm going to come to my mask node on frame 13, and press the right click here for shape animation, set that keyframe. Now again, we're just going to do exactly what we did. We're just going to work back. I'm going to come to frame 10, select these 2 points right here, shift up just like that. I'm going to zoom in here. Oh, that actually looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to frame 8 right here. I'm going to take these 2 points, shift, click, drag right here. Same with this one, shift, click, and drag. And now that I'm looking at this, seeing that we're already on frame 8, we're going to start this one before frame 7 so that they animate on in conjunction with each other. So let's go to frame 6 now. And again, we're just continuing to move points backwards. You can see that I have a few points right here. Take this one, set that right there. Take this one, drag it down. We're literally just moving a bunch of points here. That's all we're doing. I'm going to push this back to, say, frame 4. I'm going to select all these points right here since there's already a few points built up. Select, click, shift, and drag down. I'm going to go back to frame 1 and same thing here. Now you can't really see anything from this one, but before we play it back, I'm going to go into my path inspector, motion blur, crank this all the way to 10. And we're going to see now, since we move backwards in our animation, when we play our animation, it's going to play in reverse of that. So it's going to play the way we want it to, where the building comes up and moves back out. Pretty cool, right? Now, as you're going, if you want to change the timing of your animation and the keyframes that you made, you don't need to go back in and redo it by hand. What you can do is you can come to your keyframes editor right here, right? Turn it on so it pops up down here. And just so you know what keyframes you're working on, make sure in your keyframe editor, you press this little button, press show only selected tools, so that only the node that you have selected pops up here. And now you can see the keyframes that have popped up. So these are the keyframes that we're working with for this specific node. Now, if you want them to move a little bit differently, you can move them around. So for example, I could take this one here, drag it out, and you'll watch this one takes a little bit longer. I don't want to do that, and I'm going to go back to my fit screen here by pressing this little arrow button so it fits all my keyframes on screen. I'm going to put that back. What I want to do is I want to make all of them stay the same distance they are from each other, but kind of just squeeze it in, kind of like scale this animation down. So I'm going to click, drag to select all of these, and then with this little tool down here, you press it, and you can see this box kind of forms around these keyframes, and at this point, you just drag the box in, and you can see the timing of your animation changes in real time. It's pretty cool. I think that's a little bit fast, so I'm gonna drag it back out this direction. I think that looks really good, actually. I think that looks pretty damn good for those two buildings, I'm not going to lie. Those are really the only things you need to know about how to animate SVGs, or how to animate logos in DaVinci Resolve Fusion. At this point, it's just rinse and repeat, and that's it. So we're just going to move on to the next one. Let's check it out. Go to my merge, turn this one on, and you can see that this node is in charge of these two shapes right here, right? One of these shapes is this first thing here, and kind of makes this little upside down U shape. There's a little break, and the next mask is this one right here. Now, because each of these mask nodes are independently animatable, we're just going to work with that. So I want this one to be done animating, let's say here on frame 20. Now again, we could always change when it's done. I just showed you how to change the timing. So just for the sake of getting the animation started, this is what I'm going to work with. So I'm going to say on frame 20, I want the animation to be done. I'm going to come into my inspector, right click here for shape animation, click that, and let's start moving backwards, shall we? So I'm going to come to say 17, take these 2 points, click shift, go all the way up, click shift. You can see how this is going to start to get repetitive. Move my playhead back a few frames, select all of these points here, click shift. And again, I'm going to say be aware of your points. You just want to make sure that your points don't like overlap each other or intersect in any sort of means. So just remember to zoom in on your composition and figure out where your points are. What's cool about this process is that you can totally see how as you go, you have the freedom to make these pre-cut out shapes that you've imported into Fusion follow whatever path or make whatever motion that you make them have. You know what I mean? Like you can make them move any which direction. You can make them look any which way. You can speed them up or slow them down however you want. It's just a matter of how you animate these masks. So yeah, I'm just going to keep on going here. You can follow along. I'm going to just keep on animating. So I've animated this one down all the way to how I want it to be. Let's see how it looks. Cool. I'm going to go into that specific mask node, turn on my motion blur, quality all the way up, go back into spline. Let's select this movement, all these, press the letter S to smooth the movement out in between them all. And now let's check it out. I'm going to adjust the timing a little bit. So again, go into my keyframes menu, press fit to screen here, make sure that I have this first option selected, show only selected tools. Take my keyframes here, select them all, select all my keyframes, take this little tool. Now let's mess around with this. I want to see the keyframes of everything that I've worked on so far. So I'm also going to press Control here and Control here. And you can see now I have the keyframes of everything that I've also animated thus far. And I can work with these things in conjunction of each other. Now, again, this is only if they're all selected. So next I'm going to work on this little piece right here. This is a really simple one. I want this one to be done, we'll say here at 21. Go to this node, turn this on. And this one's going to be extremely simple, actually. I just want this one to animate like this. Remember to turn that motion blur on. Here we go. Take my spline also. I'm going to turn my keyframes off, get that out of the way. Select these 2 points, make my curve the way I want it to be. That doesn't look too bad. Let's move on to the next thing. Turn this merge on. Now this merge is this right here. This merge is this whole shape that sticks off from the top of this last shape that we did. From the top of this one, comes out this way, goes up and over, and it makes that stacking shape of the buildings. This last one we animated finished at around frame 20, finished on frame 21. We'll go to, this one's a kind of a bigger shape. We'll say 32, right? All right, turn this keyframe on. Gonna back up a little bit, go to 27 for this, take these 2, click shift drag, click shift drag here. And now again, here I am organizing my points. This is all about just animating points in a mask. It's that simple. It's just rinse and repeat for all of these shapes. So you go through the whole thing, and a lot of the times logos are simpler than this. This one, I made it to be specifically this way so that there was a lot of instances where you had to practice this, but a lot of times logos are much simpler. So you won't have to go through this many steps most of the time. Nonetheless, it's great practice. So So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish animating all of this stuff, and then I'm going to jump back in here, meet with you guys when that's done, and I'll show you how I've animated all of these shapes to move in the way that they have. And if there's something that pops up, a good teaching point in the meantime, I'll be sure to show you guys. I'll see you guys in just a second. Okay, while you guys are animating, there is one thing that I do want you to be aware of. One thing that I kind of put together right now was that when you have all your points, right? So check this out. Just so that you can see, I'm going to turn off all these other merge nodes. We have this shape animating on right here, right? So you can kind of see it comes like in like spurts. So it's like boop, 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 but it's not all like in one continuous motion. Like it comes here, hesitates a little bit, and then goes up, hesitates a little bit. What I did to make that kind of just like bouncy sort of motion is you come to your mask node, you go into spline, and so you can see in your spline editor, I have all of these points, right? These are the different keyframes, all of these things here. So what I did was between all of the keyframes, you make this curve. So you select the two keyframes, press S on your keyboard, and then just drag this out just like that. And you rinse and repeat for all of the different keyframes and all of the different curves between each keyframes. And this is what you end up with. Looks really nice. Keep that in mind while you're animating. I'm going to go back and apply this to all of the other node animations that I've made thus far. And we'll see what it looks like when we're done. Okay, so I've made it to this point here, right? With this shape. You can see there's two buildings kind of like there was down here. And then it has this little antenna. This one's going to be a little bit different than the ones we've done so far. Just because what we're going to do is we're going to clone this one again and then use other masks to cover up the parts that we're not animating in that moment. To get started, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom out here and I'm going to take this, pull it all the way back because we're going to need to make a little bit of room. Pull this back here. So now I can pull this here. And we're going to make a few copies. Okay, I'm going to make a merge node here, because I know I want at least 2 more copies. So let's look at this, right? I can look at this and know that I want this to be its own separate shape, this up and to the right. I want that to be blocked off, right? I want it to be its own shape. I want this building right here to be its own shape, and I want the antenna right here to be its own shape. So there's 3. We have 1, 2, 3, okay? We're good. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select this background and path 4, this mask node, press Command C, Command V, and then Command V right here again, okay? We have 3 separate shapes. Now I'm gonna turn these 2 off because I don't wanna work with these in the meantime. In the meantime, all I wanna work with is this first one. So as it stands right now, this shape is still everything. So we're going to block off the rest. And I'm going to show you guys how to do that. I'm going to take a rectangle node, okay, drag it down in here, connect it to path 4. Now immediately you get this. You don't want this. What we're going to do, come back down into path 4 here, your shape mask. In paint mode, set this to minimum. Now if you take your rectangle and pull out here, you can see that it only shows what's in your rectangle, right? So now this rectangle mask that you've connected to your shape mask, or in this case, path 4, kind of becomes your guide for what you see. In this case, I want to invert, so I only want it to show what's on the outside, if that makes sense. So I'm going to position this such that it lines up on the edge of this building. And once that's lined up, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to invert it. So now, boom, we only have that. And just to be real precise, I'm going to come right here. Bada bing, bada boom, you're good. So now this stack of nodes right here only represents this, what you see, and that's it. And because it only represents that specific shape, I want to animate this one a little bit differently. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push these up just 1 and add a transform node right here. Okay. So now this transform node controls this entire shape, as you can see. So let's get an idea of where my other animations finish, right? This one finishes right here around frame 33. I want this one to finish right here at frame 36. So in transform, given where I want the animation to finish, just like before, I'm going to set my center keyframe right here, and then we'll come to, say, frame 28. Okay, and we want this to pop up from below to up. So I'm going to bring this one down, and this is where it's going to start. Now you can still see the shape here. You don't want to be able to see the shape here. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut it off with another mask. So to do that, I'm actually going to take another rectangle node and connect it to the mask input of the merge node here. So now if I set the rectangle mask to fit the shape of our logo, you can see that when it pops in only within the boundaries of that rectangle mask. Now, again, we want to set the motion blur on. So to do motion blur in this instance, it's actually going to be in the transform node, just because the motion that we're seeing occurs within the transform node. The transform node that's actually making the motion. So check that on, set the quality all the way to up. And you know me, I always like to set my spline curve, right? So now you see pops up just like that. We got the motion blur on there, pops up just the way I want it to. And you can see there's a variety of different types of animation here. There's a lot of stuff happening all at once, but it all has that motion blur. It all has that smooth spline curve. Looks pretty damn good. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to repeat this process with the next building, right? So I'm going to turn this merge node back on. I'm going to turn this one off just so that we can only see this building here once we've cut it off. So again, you can see we have this whole shape here, but this isn't what we want. So again, we're going to take another rectangle node, drag it down, connect it to path 4, 1 here, or just this original shape. Again, paint mode set to minimum, right? And then we're going to invert this one just like we did last time. So now you can only see what's on the outside of this rectangle. All right, cool. So I'm going to set this just like that. And we don't want this to be sticking off on the side here. So I'm going to go boom. Now you see here, we still have the antenna. Because I want the antenna to pop up after the fact, we need to cut the antenna off here. So this is going to be another thing. To do that, you just rinse and repeat this process. That's all it is. So to cut something off again with the mask, I'm going to walk you through this again. Okay. Take the rectangle node, drag it on top of the thing you want to cut off, connect it to the thing you want to cut off, go in the node of the thing you want to cut off, set the paint mode to minimum, invert on the mask that you just added. Okay. I'm going to go through this whole process again, just so that you could see it play out. Rectangle node, connect it. In the previous node, the one that you just connected the new node to, you set the paint mode to minimum, which this one is still set to, and then you invert the mask you just added, right? And here you go. I'm going to set this shape just like that. So now I have just that shape isolated, and that's it. Now again, to make just this shape move, we're going to use a transform node. So I'm going to take this stack of nodes, drag it up, and then take a transform node, stick it right here, and let's see. I'm going to turn this last merge node on because I want to see where this one finished animating. This one popped up, finished animating right there at about 36 or so. Let's say we want this one to finish at 39, okay? So I'm gonna go back into that transform node, set a keyframe on my center point there, and we'll say at frame 32, we want this one to start popping up. So we're gonna drag it down in the meantime. And again, we could just copy and paste this rectangle mask that we used before. This one will work just fine. So we're gonna copy and paste right here. Or what you can do is you can just take another output right here and connect it there. And boom, same thing. You have one mask node connected to both of these. I'm going to extend this one up just a little bit because we want to be able to see it further. And oh, because I extended it up, because I wanted to make that space for the antenna right there, I'm going to set this one further down at the start of the animation. Or was it this one here? Oh, it's this first one. There we go. So now both of these pop up. I still need to add the motion blur and the spline on this most recent transform node. So motion blur on, set that to 10. Go to my spline curve for transform node 2 here. Select it. I'm going to set fit to frame, make it fit just a little bit better here. Zoom out. Select these points, press S, set my curve just the way I like it. Just like that, and boom. That looks pretty damn good. I like it. Now, again, I want to point out how the means of which we animated these two buildings right here was obviously different than the way we animated these ones. You can do this however you want. I'm just trying to show you guys here that there's more than one way to do these things, and you have the freedom to choose however you want to do. So now let's make this antenna pop up on the top of this building, right? So let's turn this one on, and you see we have our antenna. Again, we're gonna isolate this one. So I'm gonna turn these two off in the meantime, come back here, and this one we only need one mask node for on top of, just because we could use that whole rectangle mask to cover everything except for the antenna, right? So I'm gonna show you what I mean. I'm gonna drag my rectangle node here, and if you were following along, you'll know that you need to connect it, go to the previous node, set the paint mode to minimum, okay, and then invert this one. There you go. So now you have this rectangle mask that only shows what's on the outside of the mask, right? Super easy. So we're going to go through this process again for the antenna, just because this one varies just a little bit. I'm going to take my rectangle node, okay, connect it to my previous mask. I'm going to set the paint mode to minimum, which you can see it already is. And in this instance, that's all I'm going to do here. Now, because I want the antenna to pop from the top of the building up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate this mask to go just like this. You see this? Boop, and there it goes. Animate from the top up. So let me show you how this is going to work. I'm going to turn this previous node on, turn this one off, because I want to see where the previous node finished animating. So the last building finished animating on at frame 39, right? So now I know that my mask node needs to start animating for the antenna at frame 39. I'm going to select my mask node up here. Let's bring this down. Okay, you can see it's still popping up just a little bit here. So in my center controls for my mask node, I'm just gonna very carefully bring that down. That works right there, okay? So at frame 39, put that there. I'm gonna set a keyframe for the center of that mask node, and I want this one to animate up over the course of, say, like, we'll say 6 frames, right? So on frame 39, 6 frames, that puts us at frame 45. Cool, so now I'm gonna animate this up just like this. We want it to go just above there so that you can see that we did in fact get the whole antenna. Okay, now what you might be saying is, hey, well, if these are both turned on, and I'm going to turn this one on just because at this point we can. If these are both turned on, well, then that building is still there in the meantime while these are animating on, right? We don't want that. We only want this one to show the antenna once the antenna is ready to be shown. So here's how we're going to fix that. In the merge node, merge nodes have this option called blend here, right? Now what blend does is, blend is basically just opacity. That's all it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the start of the antenna animation, and that's at frame 39, like we said, right? So frame 39, where that second building stops animating on. Now at this point, we want this stack of nodes to be invisible, okay? Because we don't see the antenna yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the blend all the way down to 0. Okay, and set a keyframe. Watch what happens now. As these buildings pop up, the shape isn't there anymore, right? Because we've turned the blend down to 0 there. Now, I want the very next frame to start showing the animation of the antenna. So I'm just gonna go to frame 40 and set this all the way back up to 100. Now check it. Just like that. That's it. You just, on one frame, it's turned off, and on the next frame, it's 100% turned on, and you see only that thing that you've isolated in that stack of nodes. It's pretty simple. I know it looks complicated, and I know that there's a lot going on here. If you're following along, I hope you're able to see what's going on here. And if you have questions at this point in the video, please leave them in the comments. I will be responding to comments. I promise. I will be in the comments, and I respond as fast as I can. And normally throughout the day, I have my phone on me almost the whole time, and it doesn't take longer than just a few minutes for me to respond to a comment. So if you have a question, please leave a comment. Now, as we're going here, as you come back to the edit page, you can see the start of our masks here. Some of these need some cleaning up, and that's fine. We can go back and clean them. So to do that, we're going to do exactly what I just showed you guys, where you turn the merge node off on one frame and turn it on the next. Okay, let's go check this out. Let's go get this taken care of. A good way to be able to see where these things are is to be able to have that black background, right? So what you can do is in your little options button up here, if you uncheck checker underlay, it puts a blank background as black by default. So now we have an easier canvas to see where we need to clean some things up on. So I only see 2 imperfections here. It looks like this first one, this first one is right here, right? So that's at frame 0. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come to the merge node that connects this to the flow line, set this all the way down to 0 in the opacity, go to frame 1, and then turn it on. And at this point, it's already starting to animate, so it's all good. That looks fine. Let's figure out what mask this one is. So it doesn't look to be that one, obviously. Was it this one here? No. It's this one right here. So in this case, and as I'm zooming in, I see another imperfection right here. But again, we'll fix that. In the meantime, we're looking at this one right here. Okay, so this one starts to animate on at frame 9. Okay, so at frame 9, we're going to turn this opacity off. And at frame 10, we're going to turn it back on. And you can see it's already popping in. So now I'm seeing there's a little bit of an imperfection here, okay? And I've isolated that as this mask right here. This is the shape that comes out to make this building here. I'm just gonna do the exact same thing. This one starts animating on at frame 8, it looks like. So on frame 8, I'm gonna set the blend to 0, and then frame 9, turn it on all the way. There, and at this point, it's already moving out, so it looks good. We're looking good. One other thing I do want to do, though, is just make a spline for the antenna, and we still need to turn that motion blur on. So the motion blur is on now. Go to our spline curve here, select these points, smooth it out, set a curve. Now let's see what it looks like. I'm going to put my checker underlay back on and check this out from my page here. Now, I want to see this playback smoothly, so I'm going to turn on my render cache, set this to smart, and let this cache. We'll see what it looks like when it's done. All right, it's done caching. Let's see what it looks like. That looks pretty good. I'm pretty stoked with this. This looks really good. So now there is a few other things we need to do. We know that there's a little building right here with some lines inside, and there's some text underneath. So let's get started on the building. So this is the next node stack here in my group. Now, this node stack has a bunch of different masks connected to it. You can see this one here is our line here. This one's the next line, and then we have the shape of the building. Now, just for the sake of simplicity, what I want to do is I want to break all of these things down into their own separate node stack, okay? Each one of these different shapes so that they're in their own separate node stack, and then animate them like we did here with transform nodes, so that way each of these individual pieces can animate in on their own and everything's all good. So again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some space here. I want to push this all the way over. This can go all the way over. All of this can go all the way over, just because we need to add some more merge nodes on our line, right? This can come over here. So there are 4 separate elements here. So we need 4 separate merge nodes, of which we already have 1. So I'm going to add 2, 3, there's 3. And here is 4. Okay, now I'm going to copy this background node. Copy. I'm going to click above the node I want to paste it to. Paste, click, and paste. Connect it all in here. Now this is going to pop up. This is fine. This is just the color that the shape is using to make what our shape looks like. This is okay. I want my first one that I have here to be just this little bar right here. Okay, that's fine. I want my second one to be this bar. So I'm going to take this bar, move it here. I'm going to take this bar, move it here. And I'm going to take this building shape, move it there. We're good to go. So you can see in essence what I did was I took each one of these shapes and made them their own node stack so that I could transform their position and where they are in the logo individually. So to make sure that they all can animate on their own, they all need a transform node, which means they need a little bit of space here. So I'm going to push them all up 1 and then take a transform node and put the transform node in each one of these stacks here. So let's get animating. So the first node stack only pertains to this middle bar right here. Now again, just so that you could see what we're animating easily, I'm going to turn the rest of these off. Okay, so we're only animating this position here. Now our last element finishes animating on around frame 39, right? Or was it 45 was where the antenna finishes animating on. But I want this to finish animating on before then. I want everything to kind of wrap up a little bit before. So let's say I want this bar to finish animating on around frame 37, okay? So I have my playhead set to frame 37. I'm going to set a keyframe on the center position. And since this is only a point A to point B sort of animation, it's really simple. I just need to pull it back a few frames. Let's say frame 29. And we're just going to drag down. And now I'm beneath the bottom line of all these other shapes. And this is again where I add another mask to the merge node. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a mask and connect it to the merge node of this stack. And I want this to come right here. So I'm going to drag the bottom. So now whenever our shape animates above, it'll be just right there. Now again, in my transform node, I'm going to turn my motion blur on. Crank that up to 10, go to my spline curve for transform, and I'm gonna set this spline curve to have the curve that I like. Just pull out like that. Boom, that looks great. And now, honestly, what I could do, since I've already done the work on the transform, I'm actually going to delete these transform nodes and just copy and paste. Set this one in there. To take a node and shove it in the flow line, what you wanna do is you wanna click and drag, okay, keep it held down, but then press shift so that when you take your mouse over the flow line, you could see it go through, let go, and now this is connected. I wanna offset this one just a little bit. So I'm going to go into my keyframe editor, and you can see here I have both sets of keyframes on the exact same time. And in this case, this top set of keyframes is my second shape. So I'm going to push that right there. And to make sure that they pop up from the same mask, again, I'm just going to take the output of my rectangle mask here and connect it to merge 25. Check it. And it pops up with it just like that. And again, I'm going to do the same thing for the next one. I'm going to take this transform node, copy, paste, stick it in the flow line, move the keyframe over just a little bit. Take this rectangle mask, connect it to merge, and we got to turn merge on. Check it out. And you can see they all pop up with each other. Really nifty. The last one now is just this one right here. I'm going to take my transform node again, copy, paste, stick it in the flow line. We got to move those keyframes over just a little bit. I'm going to do a little bit more on this one because I want this one to pop up just a little bit later. Now you can see once I have this transform node in, when it's at its bottom resting point, it's still a little overlapping right here. So I'm going to set it to the first keyframe and bring it down just a little bit more so that way it's out of the way. And when we connect our rectangle mask here, you can't see it. Pops up just like that. That looks really damn good. I'm really stoked with how this looks, honestly. That looks pretty sick. So now the only thing left to do is add in our letters. Now you're gonna notice since there was text in the SVG logo that we imported, each one of those letters was imported as its own separate shape. Now we're obviously not gonna animate this super complicated shape right here. That's a lot of points. So here's what we're gonna do instead, right? I'm gonna put all of these merge nodes right next to each other so that I could select them all at the same time and turn them on. Select all these. on. You can see it says Skyline Markets here. However, again, just because we're working with a bunch of masks here and the masks make these overlaps with the shapes of the background node they're attached to, it looks all funky. We're obviously not going to use these letters, okay? So since you can see now what's wrong with them, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these nodes, again, except for the last one. We covered this in the beginning, and just delete them. We're not going to use them. Here's what we are going to do instead. If you decided to follow along with me, the files that you downloaded from my website should include a PNG file. That PNG file looks just like this, right? So I'm going to take that PNG file, import it into my project, and now when we go back into our nodes here, look at this. I'm going to add another merge node, all this empty space. I'm going to take that PNG file, connect it to that merge node, and you can see our text reappears in PNG format. However, because the whole PNG is visible, you can see all the shapes are still there as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a rectangle mask node, leave it above our media in, which in this case is our PNG, connect it to the mask input, and now we're going to extend the shape of our mask so that it only covers our letters. I'm going to center it around the letters and then just smush it in here. So now we still get our animation while our letters stay there, and our letters look normal this time because our letters are being used from the PNG asset while all of our shapes are being used from the SVG. Now I still want to add some like animation to these letters. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set my playhead at frame 35 right here, right when our animation looks just like this. And I'm going to take our center for our mask and pull it over this way so that you can't see anything. In your inspector for that mask, go to your center, set a keyframe. I'm going to pull it over to frame 47 right here when everything's done animating, and pull it back so that it covers all of these words. Again, motion blur. You don't animate anything without motion blur. That's just my rule of thumb. Go into your spline curve, select this curve, smooth it out, add your spline curve, just like that. And now let's let this render cache on the edit page and see what it looks like. All right, our rendering's done. Let's give it a play. That looks really good. That looks sick. Honestly, that looks really sick. If this was a real company, I made this up, by the way. This Skyline Markets doesn't exist. This is just a logo I made specifically for the purpose of this video. But man, if they existed, like, this would be fire. That looks damn good. I'm really happy with how this turned out. That looks sick. I could watch this all night. This is really cool. Okay, so your logo animation is done, but now you need to be able to use it, right? Well, here's where rendering your animation comes into play. There's a few ways you could render this. You could render it just exactly as it is right now, and what you're gonna get is a black background, right? So if you're rendering QuickTime H.265 MP4, you're gonna get that black background. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you how to make it so that when you render, your background stays blank, and you could take that file that you render and put it on top of whatever you want. What I mean by that is you can see when we go into Fusion, our background is blank here, right? So like when we're working on our animation, you can see that there's absolutely nothing behind it. Man, I could just watch that all day. So here's how we're going to render it so that it stays blank and you can use it in another project. We're going to come to the deliver page here, set a title for your animation. This is your file name, set where you want it to go. I'm just gonna render mine to my desktop for the sake of this video. Now, pay attention to these settings, okay? So that you can keep that background blank, that's called preserving the alpha channel. You want your format to set to QuickTime, codec, GoPro Cineform, okay? Now, the GoPro company has this codec. Now, when you set the type to RGB 16-bit, and then 16-bit is actually crazy. 16-bit is nuts. The amount of data that you can be packed into 16 bits is just insane. Set it to 16-bit and then press export alpha right here. Now, what this does is it makes sure that when it renders this file, it keeps that background blank. And that's all you really need to do here. I'm going to confirm that our in and out point is set to our file. Press add to render queue, render all. All right, now it is rendering our animation and it's done. It took my computer, it says 6 seconds. I want to show you guys what this looks like. I'm going to come to my edit page, import my animation that we just rendered out on my desktop, logo animation. What you're going to notice is that you're not going to be able to play this in your regular media player. Since this is an alpha video, it can only be played in your video editor. So I'm going to take it and drag it into my video editor. You can see here that it plays in our preview just fine. I'm going to drag it in here just so that you can see that the background is blank. You can see there's black here. I'm going to take a generator. I'm going to do a solid color, drag this out. Let's make our color something other than black. Okay. Let's set it to blue. I like blue. We have a blank background, and that background shows behind our animation. So now you can take this file that you just exported with the alpha and use it in whatever videos you're making for these companies. You could use it at the beginning of their videos. You could use it at the opening. You could use it in their TikTok intros. Whatever you want to do, you can do it. And it makes it super easy, makes it very flexible with whatever freedom you're giving it. Otherwise, if you just want to render this like normal, you just come to your export settings, set your codec settings to H.265, add to render queue, and render like normal. This one's taking a little bit longer, but that's okay. Okay, 7 seconds instead of 6, whatever. Now, just for the sake of demonstration, I want to show you guys that if you import this in your project here, this one will not have a blank background. Okay, so you can see there's black here. I'm going to take that blue color that we added in, drag it beneath here, and you can't see it because this background is not blank. We didn't export it in the alpha. Here, we exported in the alpha. Now you have these two files that you can do whatever you want with. This is really powerful when working with companies, working with corporations or clients that have their own media, that have their own brand, that have their own identity, so that you can make these videos for them and make their logo pop a little bit. You don't want it to just like fade in. Give it some motion, make it lively. So that's all there is to know about animating logos in DaVinci Resolve with Fusion. Just keep in mind that when you're doing this, SVG files are totally best for this workflow. I hope you were able to learn from this. Drop a like, leave a comment, tell me what project you think you're going to be using this on if you have any clients coming up. I'd really like to know at what point in this tutorial this clicked for you. If you just like, oh, I got it now. I think I already said leave a like for the algorithm because the channel's going crazy lately and I'd love for you to be part of it. And subscribe if you think you have anything to gain from me in the future. Thank you guys so much for watching and I will see you in the next video.